Permanent Coffee Stain presents Sit, Sip, and Listen. And now our feature presentation of Kofi, Clay of the Crown, written by Anthony James Owens. Chapter 1, The Trespass. The shot rang out too close. Kofi Bediako dove behind a broken section of quarry fencing, breath sharp in his throat. The acrid stench of burning diesel clung to the humid Ghanaian air as Europa Gem's private patrol swept the tree line with flashlights and rifles. The night buzzed with cicadas, interrupted only by barking orders and the mechanical growl of distant generators. "He went this way," one of the guards shouted, boots slapping the damp clay. Kofi clenched the frayed satchel at his side. Inside, the clay pulsed against his chest like a second heart. It was warm, always warm, as though it remembered being alive. His muscles tensed, but not from fear. The clay had changed him. He could feel the power in his legs, in the rhythm of his breathing, measured, calm, deliberate. He was fast enough now to vanish into the trees like mist. If he ran, they wouldn't catch him. Not even close. But home was over the next ridge. Old Aboagye, the clinic, the children, the elders. If he ran now, he'd lead these devils straight to them. That was a cost he would never pay. The wind shifted, and so did Kofi. He sprang from cover, darting low across the clearing like a whisper through tall grass. The first guard turned, too late. Kofi was on him in a blink, striking with just enough force to disarm, not kill. The man crumpled with a soft groan, his flashlight spinning uselessly into the brush. Another guard raised his rifle. But Kofi's body had already moved. He sidestepped, planted, and wrenched the weapon free, snapping the barrel over his thigh like it was dried bamboo. The broken metal clattered into the grass, useless. The third man shouted, raising a stun baton. Kofi moved again, faster than thought, faster than instinct. One hand diverted the swing, the other gripped the man's shoulder and twisted him down to the ground, harmless. He groaned, winded, but alive. There was no blood, no death, only clarity. The clay coursed through him now, carrying not just strength, but something deeper, memory, purpose, will. His ancestors spoke through every fiber of muscle and every flicker of motion. He wasn't just fighting for survival. He was defending a legacy, one born of earth, of blood, of something the mining executives would never understand. The guards faltered. A horn blared in the distance. Europa Gem's reinforcements. More boots, more guns, drones and dogs. They would come in waves now, certain they could end this before it reached headlines or holy grounds. But Kofi didn't waver. He turned to the horizon, where the first blush of dawn was beginning to split the sky with streaks of crimson and gold. His shadow stretched across the red clay behind him. He adjusted the satchel against his side, squared his shoulders, and stepped forward. Time to finish this. Chapter 2. Unearthed. Just days earlier, he'd lived quietly, predictably, almost invisibly. At 28, Kofi Bediako had never wandered far from the bounds of his village in Ghana's western region. His world was a mosaic of cracked earth, ripening cassava, and low green hills that rolled like sleeping giants toward the forest. The land he worked belonged to his family for generations. Narrow patches of maize and cassava that yielded just enough to eat, sometimes sell, and almost always pray over. Each day he rose with the sun, washed at the river, and stepped barefoot into the fields, hoe in hand. At dusk, he returned home, sweat-soaked and sore, to sit beside his mother Ama and his younger sister Ajoa under the warm glow of an oil lamp. He never dreamed of more. Not because he lacked imagination, but because life had taught him that dreaming was expensive and rarely delivered. In the distance, the Europa Gem Mining Corporation loomed like a silent predator. Their fences snaked through ancestral lands. Their machinery roared without rest, belching smoke into skies that once danced with birds. What began as a whisper of employment had grown into an empire of extraction. The elders called the machines iron demons. Even the birds flew higher now, as though unwilling to breathe the same air. Kofi, like many, had grown numb to the invasion. There was no fighting giants, so he toiled beside their fences, careful not to trespass, careful not to question. Until that afternoon. The sky churned overhead, swollen and dark with the promise of rain. The air was thick with tension, like something unseen was holding its breath. Kofi worked a forgotten trail near the edge of the company's perimeter, a maintenance path choked with weeds and overgrowth. The blade of his hoe struck something hard. He expected stone, a rusted pipe, an old machine part. But when he knelt and brushed the soil away, what he found defied expectation. It was smooth, unnaturally so, dark and oval-shaped, about the size of his palm and threaded faintly with lines of copper that shimmered beneath the dust. Even in the shade of the overgrowth, the object radiated warmth as though it held its own sun within. When he lifted it from the earth, a soft vibration buzzed through his fingertips, a hum, low and constant, like it had been waiting for him. He stared at it, breath caught. Company policy was clear. Any unregistered geological find belonged to Europa Gem. Turning it in could mean a finder's bonus, a few hundred cedis, maybe more. But something in Kofi rebelled, something ancestral, something buried beneath logic. He couldn't name it, but he felt it, a pull from within. So he wrapped the object carefully in the cloth lining his satchel and slipped it into the pocket of his trousers. That night, Amma's cough was worse. The porridge he made sat cooling in her bowl, untouched. Her eyes, rimmed with exhaustion, watched the flickering lamplight as she held a trembling letter in her lap. "The clinic called," she murmured. 400 cedis. I don't know how we... Kofi swallowed the tightness in his chest. His hand brushed over the satchel, now resting at his side. "I will find a way," he said softly, the hum of the clay still echoing against his ribs. Chapter 3. The Dreaming. The next dawn found Kofi at the village's edge, standing before a hut older than memory. It sat in silence beneath the outstretched limbs of an ancient tree, its mud walls faded and cracked, yet still bearing the ceremonial sigils of a forgotten age. Lines of ochre, charcoal, and white clay looped across the surface like veins, ritual markings whispered into place by fingers that had long returned to dust. This was the home of Old Aboagye, the last living shaman of their people. Some villagers avoided the hut entirely. Children dared each other to touch the door and run. Others came only when sickness or sorrow drove them. But Kofi came with something else, a weight he didn't yet understand. He knocked once. The wooden door creaked inward. The interior was a cave of shadows, lit only by a single oil lamp that cast dancing shapes across the earthen walls. The air was thick with the smell of dried herbs, ash, and something more ancient, like time itself had taken root in the corners. Small bones dangled from twine, and carved stones lined the shelves like silent judges. Aboagye lay on a reed mat, eyes half-lidded, skin as wrinkled as tree bark. He was impossibly old. Stories said he had survived the colonial guns and remembered when the river still ran with fish. "You disturbed the earth's silence," the shaman rasped, voice like dry leaves in the wind. But he didn't wave Kofi away. Instead, he slowly sat upright, motioning to the low table before him. Kofi stepped forward and placed the wrapped object on the table's center. Aboagye's fingers hovered above it for a moment, trembling slightly. His clouded eyes narrowed. Then, with surprising gentleness, he peeled back the frayed cloth. The object caught the lamp's glow and hummed faintly in response. Aboagye's breath caught. He leaned in. "Nzema clay," he murmured. "Hardened, royal dot." Kofi blinked. "Royal? You mean—" The old man nodded solemnly. "Placed under the tongues of the Obra kings during coronation rites. The clay was sacred, drawn from earth blessed by lightning and blood. It granted strength beyond muscle, speed beyond instinct, and healing deeper than medicine, but only to those of the line." Kofi's brow furrowed. "You think I'm royalty?" "It binds only with the worthy," Aboagye said. "The blood may sleep for generations, but it remembers." Kofi couldn't help but scoff lightly. "Or maybe it's just old medicine. Maybe it's dead." The shaman's eyes gleamed. "Even ash remembers fire." He pushed the cloth-wrapped clay back toward Kofi. "Sleep with it. Let your body rest beside it. If your ancestors still walk the spirit roads, they will visit you. If not, you'll awaken with only questions." That night, Kofi lay on his straw mat in silence. The clay pressed gently beneath his pillow. Rain tapped lightly against the roof, a rhythm older than speech. And then sleep took him. In his dream, the sky was the color of spilled pomegranate, stretched wide over a blackened horizon. From the obsidian cliffs rose figures, tall, golden, cloaked in robes stitched with starlight and thread woven from time. Their faces were veiled, but their presence stirred awe. They did not speak at first. They only raised their hands in unison, palms glowing with light. Then, a single voice, many and one at once, filled the air like thunder rolling beneath the skin. "Use it. One of us." Chapter 4. The Miracle. Kofi woke with a jolt, breath ragged, the metallic taste of copper still sharp on his tongue. The dream lingered like smoke. Those golden figures, their glowing palms, and that single undeniable command, "Use it. One of us." He sat upright in the dim morning light, heart pounding with a quiet urgency he couldn't shake. The clay, still wrapped in its cloth, rested on the floor beside his bed as if it had been waiting, as if it had heard the dream too. Down the hall, his mother coughed, a dry, rattling sound that clawed its way out of her chest. It echoed through the house like a drumbeat of desperation. Kofi moved quickly. In the kitchen, he filled a clay cup with fresh water, then returned to his room. With deliberate care, he unwrapped the artifact. It pulsed faintly in his palm, still warm as ever. He drew the edge of a blade along its surface, shaving off a fine layer of reddish-brown powder. It fell into the cup like ash from a sacred fire. The water hissed softly, fizzing as the powder dissolved. A faint scent, earthy, strange, almost electric, rose from the mixture. Kofi stirred it with the handle of a spoon until the liquid stilled. Amma sat on the edge of her bed, blanket wrapped around her shoulders. Her face was pale, drawn tight from weeks of sickness, and her eyes had the glassy sheen of a woman carrying too much pain. Still, when she saw Kofi approach, she smiled faintly. "Is that porridge?" she asked, voice hoarse. He shook his head. "No, Ma, it's something else." She eyed the cup with a weary frown. "What is this?" "A gift," Kofi said gently. "Please, just drink. Trust me." Amma hesitated. Her gaze moved between Kofi and the cup, suspicion flaring. But then she saw the determination in his face, something quiet and unmovable, something ancient. She reached out with trembling fingers and took the cup, one sip, then another. She grimaced at the taste. "It's strange." Finish it, Kofi urged. She did. Minutes passed. Kofi sat on the edge of the bed, heart pounding, watching her face for any sign, any flicker, any change. She sat still, blinking slowly, as if waiting for disappointment to settle in. Then she inhaled. Deep. Full. Amma blinked again, eyes wide. She put a hand to her chest. No pain. She stood slowly. No wince. No tremor. No cough. She straightened her back, flexed her fingers, and took a step forward. Then another. I don't understand, she whispered. I feel alive. She laughed suddenly, loud, unbroken, triumphant. A full-bodied laugh that echoed through the small house. Kofi could barely breathe before she threw her arms around him, hugging him with the strength of a woman half her age. Adjoa returned from school just as the sun crowned the sky. She opened the door to find their mother dancing, twirling slowly in the living room, humming a melody no one had heard in years. The village whispered by evening. Some called it witchcraft. Others called it divine favor. Some feared it. Others prayed it would spread. But Kofi said nothing. He only stared at the clay, still pulsing in its cloth, and wondered what else it could do. Chapter 5. Awakening. The sun dipped low over the red hills as Kofi made his way back to the edge of the village. The air was thick with the scent of burning wood and distant rain. Each step felt heavier, not from fatigue, but from the gravity of what he carried. In the satchel at his side, the clay hummed like a restless heart. Old Aboagye was waiting. The shaman sat cross-legged on the threshold of his hut, eyes closed as though listening to a frequency the living could not hear. Smoke from a bundle of smoldering herbs curled around him like a serpent, painting strange patterns in the dying light. Kofi bowed, then knelt before him. He set the cloth-wrapped clay down between them. "It works," he said, voice trembling with equal parts awe and disbelief. "It healed her. My mother. The cough is gone. She danced." Aboagye opened his eyes slowly. The cataracts that clouded them did nothing to dull their depth. He nodded once. "Then it is time." Kofi blinked. "Time for what?" The shaman reached behind him, producing a weathered mortar and pestle carved with faded symbols. He placed the clay into the bowl and began to grind. The sound was rhythmic, ancient. The powder formed quickly, thick and red as blood dust. When it was done, Aboagye scooped the fine dust into a small wooden cup and added water from a gourd. The mixture swirled like a storm. "Drink it all," the shaman said. "Let the royal blood stir." Kofi hesitated for only a breath. Then he took the cup, raised it to his lips, and drank. It was bitter, more bitter than he expected. But it wasn't just the taste. The clay carried something alive. The sensation moved through his mouth, down his throat, and into his chest like lightning wrapped in soil. Then the world fractured. His vision exploded with light. Color bled from the edges of the world, replaced by flame and wind and shadow. He saw warriors, barefoot and blazing with power, outrunning arrows, lifting tree trunks like walking gods. He saw healers with glowing hands, pulling sickness out of broken bodies. He saw kings standing on mountaintops beneath thunderous skies, their eyes glowing like twin suns. And he saw himself, somewhere between the past and the now, standing at the center of it all. When he woke, he was on Aboagye's reed mat. His body ached, but it was the ache of a vessel remade. His limbs felt forged, not born. His breath came easy, but it carried the weight of generations. The next morning, as mist rolled across the fields, chaos struck. A buffalo, spooked by the scent of diesel and the roar of quarry machinery, broke from its pen. It barreled toward his home, hooves pounding like war drums. Kofi stepped outside as Amma screamed. He didn't run. He walked forward, calm as still water. The beast lowered its horns. Kofi met it head on. In a flash, his hands gripped the horns. The momentum of the buffalo should have crushed him, but he held, turned it, redirected its fury like a leaf on a stream. The animal staggered, then galloped away, unharmed but confused. Villagers gathered, stunned into silence. From across the field, a Europa Gem security officer raised his rifle, uncertain. Kofi saw him, raised his hands. No threat, only peace. The man lowered his weapon, his eyes wide. And the village watched a new kind of legend begin to rise. Chapter 6. The Offer. The world took notice. Word of the miracle spread far beyond the village's dusty roads and mango groves. First, it was whispers. Stories of a mother cured overnight, of a man who stopped a charging buffalo with his bare hands. Then came the cell phone footage, grainy and raw, shared over WhatsApp and posted to online forums. Soon, radio hosts in Takoradi were asking about the clay guardian. Bloggers speculated about ancient medicine. Faith healers took credit. Foreign interest ignited. By the end of the week, strangers had arrived. Journalists came with notepads and rolling cameras. Some came searching for truth. Others came sniffing for scandal. Aid organizations sent polite inquiries. Anthropologists emailed the district chief. But the most unwelcome guest came in a helicopter. It landed just outside the village, its blades kicking up a storm of dust and leaves. Children scattered, goats bleated. The elders watched from shaded doorways, their eyes narrowed. Out stepped Herr Müller. He wore a suit too stiff for the heat and sunglasses that reflected the entire village without letting a single thing in. A Europa Gem insignia gleamed from the breast of his lapel like a badge of conquest. Behind him followed two security contractors in desert camo and a man in a pale blue tie carrying a black briefcase. Müller walked with slow purpose until he stood before Kofi, who waited barefoot by the new clinic wall, arms crossed. "I've heard stories," Müller said in clipped English. "Impossible stories. And when stories begin to affect company assets, I come in person." He gestured to the briefcase. "We can make you very rich. You deserve it, no? Your mother is well. Your village has a clinic. Now imagine what more you could do, with our help. Share your discovery. Partner with us." Kofi didn't blink. "It doesn't belong to me. It belongs to this land, to my people." Müller's smile faltered. "Think carefully, Mr. Bediako. Sometimes things get taken anyway, quietly, legally, or not. We are not a charity." Kofi took a slow breath. "Try." It was not a threat. It was an invitation. The guards reached for their rifles. Kofi moved before metal cleared the holsters. In 3 heartbeats, he disarmed one with a twisting motion that snapped the weapon in half. The second he flipped onto his back with a sweep of the leg and a single blow to the shoulder. The third never reached for his weapon at all. He simply froze as Kofi locked eyes with him, presence alone enough to paralyze. Müller stumbled backward. His briefcase thudded into the dirt. Kofi stepped forward, calm as sunrise. With one effortless motion, he lifted Müller off his feet and hoisted him over his shoulder like a sack of yam. The German executive sputtered, shoes kicking helplessly in the air as Kofi carried him toward the village boundary. There, beneath the great baobab tree, Kofi set him down. "You will leave," he said, voice low and steady, iron wrapped in thunder, "and you will not return." The helicopter lifted moments later, blades shrieking in retreat, rising into the evening sky like a fleeing ghost. And the village exhaled. Chapter 7. The Guardian. The clinic rose slowly, not from steel and concrete, but from earth and purpose. It stood modest yet proud, its walls molded from the same red clay that held the village's stories, shaped by calloused hands and tireless hearts. Under Kofi's guidance, it became more than a building. It became a promise. He refused to let foreign contractors handle the construction. "This land has always healed us," he told the village elders. "Let it teach us how to build again." Children helped carry water from the river. Elders shaped bricks under the sun. Even skeptical neighbors, once wary of his power, joined in with silent reverence. Within weeks, the structure stood, a wide central room flanked by treatment corners, an open veranda shaded by woven palm leaves, and a single wooden sign that read, in faded blue, "House of Life." Amma stepped into her role with grace and fire. Once too weak to rise from bed, she now moved briskly through the clinic with a scarf tied around her head and a satchel of herbs at her side. Her touch soothed, her voice commanded. She was no longer simply Kofi's mother, she was the healer of the people. Adjoa, bright-eyed and eager, followed closely. She took notes on the ailments of neighbors, helped apply bandages, and kept inventory of the supplies stacked on the clay shelves. "One day," she told Kofi with a grin, "I'll know more than Ma." He smiled but said nothing. He hoped she would. Kofi himself refused to be called a leader. He did not sit in council meetings or sign documents. He accepted no money, no titles, no spotlight. His only payment was the safety of the land, the laughter of children, and the peace that returned to the eyes of his people. But the world beyond still watched. Scientists came, this time not with greed, but with genuine curiosity. A coalition of African researchers, healers, and conservationists arrived in dusty jeeps, notebooks in hand, voices full of questions. Kofi allowed them to study the clay, under strict conditions. No samples were to be taken beyond the land. No patents, no weapons, only knowledge. And in exchange, they delivered what his people needed most: filtration systems for clean water, solar panels for electricity, shipments of essential medicines, and training for a new generation of local caregivers. Every deal was made in the open. Every agreement translated into every dialect spoken in the region. Transparency, Kofi insisted, was the only path forward. Still, he remained distant. He knew now that his strength was not just for lifting, healing, or defending. It was for guarding the memory of his ancestors, the dignity of his people, the sacredness of the earth. At night, when the clinic's lamps dimmed and the crickets began their ancient chorus, Kofi slipped away into the forest. He walked beneath the whispering baobab trees until he found the place where the stars broke through the canopy like scattered embers. There, he knelt, not to pray for more power, but to give thanks for the burden, the bloodline, and the clay that had awakened something eternal in him. Chapter 8. The Return. But peace never lingers, not when profit breathes just beyond the horizon. 3 weeks after the village began to heal, the stillness shattered. They came not in helicopters this time, but in blacked-out trucks that crawled along the ridgelines at dusk. Foreign plates, tinted glass, unmarked crates stacked in the beds. The villagers saw the dust trails first, rising behind the convoys like dark smoke. Then came the rumors. These weren't government men, nor scientists. They wore no logos, no identification, only weapons and mirrored glasses. Mercenaries, not sent by Europa Gem directly, but by those who funded them. Offshore partners, investors, people too powerful to have names spoken aloud. They did not come to negotiate. They came to reclaim what they believed was theirs. Their mission: eliminate the anomaly, reclaim the clay, leave no resistance. That night, The air buzzed with tension. Oil flares burned beyond the quarry fence, casting jagged shadows across the treetops. Drones with blinking red eyes hummed in low circles above the tree line, their rotors like insects sniffing for prey. Kofi stood alone at the village border, staff in hand, staring into the fire-lit horizon. He had felt them coming before the scouts did. The earth itself had shifted, roots tense, birds silent, even the crickets too afraid to sing. The land spoke. He listened. From behind the trees, Old Aboagye stepped into view. The shaman's presence was pale, his skin nearly translucent under the moonlight. He looked more spirit than man now, hollow but knowing. "This will be your final trial," Aboagye said, his voice barely louder than the wind. "Do not fight like a man." Kofi turned to him, calm. "Then how?" Aboagye's gaze deepened. "Fight like the land." And when the attack came, Kofi did not retreat. He moved like water through fire, fluid, fierce, and uncatchable. Bullets whipped past him, but never found their mark. He ducked beneath muzzles, broke weapons with his bare hands, and redirected aggression like the wind rerouting smoke. The mercenaries came trained to kill, but they had never fought something they could not anticipate, something that was not just muscle and speed, but understanding. Kofi saw their fears before they fired. He smelled their hesitation. He knew their breaking point. He fought not to destroy, but to protect, and in that restraint, he became unstoppable. By dawn, the dust had settled. Dozens of mercenaries lay groaning on the clay, wounded but alive. Their commanders, shaken, disarmed, disbelieving, finally raised their hands in surrender. Kofi stood above them, his skin streaked with sweat and dirt, his eyes steady as stone. He spared them. He always would. Epilogue. Blood of the Earth. Today, Kofi Bediako walks the village paths barefoot. He greets every neighbor by name. Children run beside him with laughter in their throats. Mothers bless his passing with quiet prayers. Elders lean forward when he enters, as if in the presence of both man and myth. The clinic thrives, its walls painted with new murals, images of healing hands, dancing ancestors, and red clay turned sacred. Clean water runs freely now. Electricity hums from solar panels. The people no longer fear the fences beyond the fields. The forest remains untouched. Europa Gem quietly withdrew. Their branding disappeared. Their documents went missing. The company rebranded, repackaged, and pretended defeat had never happened. But the people remember. They remember the sickness that almost took Amma. They remember the buffalo that never harmed them. They remember the stranger in a suit carried like a sack of grain. And they remember the night the earth itself fought back. In distant museums and private labs, men in suits examine fragments of clay sealed behind glass. They ask each other, what makes it so special? They never understand, because it was never the clay alone. It was the lineage, the memory, the covenant. It was the will of the land itself. The earth had chosen a guardian, and Kofi, son of Amma, heir of Obra, had answered the call. End.
From the roots to the flame. dust, royal soul. No crown, but still he bold. Mama sick, no hope left. Clay said live, took that breath. Now she danced, full of light. Moon came back to the night. No chain, no deal, no check. He said this land we protect. Clay in chest, calm in fight. Eyes like stars in a rebel set.
Built by clay, I get built by clay. Built by clay, I don't stray. I was built by clay. Kofi, built by clay. Yeah, boy, yeah, boy.
They came fast, came with guns. Kofi moved like morning runs. Dust flew, fists spoke, but he gave peace, didn't choke. No kill, no shame. He walked Miller off in flame. Told him go, don't come back. Earth don't bow for gold or stat.
I was built by clay. I get burnt by clay. I don't break, I don't stray. I was built by clay. Obra clay, Africa rises, built by fire, stand like stone, never alone. We got hard from the start. I was built by clay, built by clay.
You have been listening to Kofi, Clay of the Crown. Stay tuned for more stories, books, ebooks, and audiobook releases. Thank you.